this headline in the Globe a couple of days ago about ICE looking for 250 parking spots in downtown Boston. Are they looking to put some kind of facility there? What's happening?
We don't have any specific information, not that we ever have gotten any information from ICE, even when we have asked, even when we have exercised our legal right through submitting FOIA requests to get any sense of data on what their operations are and who they're targeting and why. So we don't have anything beyond just the national news that they put out a nationwide request in certain locations to secure what looks like private parking. And we continue to make very clear that Boston will continue to oppose any expansion of their illegal and immoral actions. They are not a public safety agency.
So if they want private parking, what can you even do about that if it's private parking?
There's not too much that we can directly prohibit in terms of business contracts that they could theoretically arrange on their own. We in Boston have signed an executive order alongside 7 other of our surrounding municipalities saying ICE is not permitted to stage any of their operations on public property at the city level. They're not permitted to use public spaces that are open to everyone, but for specific purposes, like libraries or community centers. They cannot conduct other operations here that are not in line with these institutions' purposes. And the governor has also signed an executive order similarly around state property that the legislature has codified to some extent with the PROTECT Act now. And so where we can at the city level and the state level have carved out areas like public spaces, churches, schools, other institutions, but we're going to keep fighting and keep holding on. I will say, not too long ago, the federal government's lawsuit against Boston, the sanctuary city lawsuit that they had much fuss over, and that was about going to DC and all of this, that was tossed out in federal court. And so Boston soundly won that lawsuit fairly recently. And so we are going to continue to follow the law and continue to protect our community.
Before we get to the calls and the text at 877-301-8970, one more question about the savagery of the Trump administration and a related thing. We talked yesterday to the Attorney General. We spoke last week or 2 weeks ago to the governor about this TPS decision by Trump and the ruling supporting it essentially from the Supreme Court of the United States. Beyond urging Congress to do something, does the city have any ability to protect individuals here? And a corollary question, your buddy, Mayor Mamdani, announced the other day that he had to lay off a ton of Haitian employees of the city of New York because the work permit thing, which you understand far better than I, had expired under this ruling. Have you encountered a similar situation?
So the responsibility of employers is very clear and something that we've been communicating alongside the governor and the attorney general's office, that we have to follow employment law, including federal law. It is employers' responsibilities to ensure that when someone is hired to your organization that they have legal authorization to work. It is not an employer's responsibility to every single day or week monitor everyone's employment authorization throughout your entire workforce. And so we have had employees who have taken leave from the city of Boston now that they are not able to live and work and are trying to figure out other situations. But we are a city that does not ask or make decisions based on immigration status, other than that sort of following the letter of the law when it comes to hiring.
What if you didn't follow the letter of the law? And I don't mean that as a reckless question, just screw them all kind of thing. Let's assume you didn't follow the letter of the law vis-a-vis the right to work of Haitians in this country. And again, as we said yesterday, people should know Secretary Rubio's office has released information, a travel advisory saying it's unsafe for any American to go to Haiti, yet he wants to deport Haitians back to the country they left for reasons of fear, economic hardship, etc. What if you failed to comply? What would happen in the city?
There are specific consequences around violations of law that could be anywhere from audits to penalties around how knowingly the law was flaunted or not followed. I think there's an entire legal movement right now as well, particularly focusing on our TPS holders or former TPS holders about going through the court system and asserting the injustice of what's happening. I think in the day-to-day, we never want to put the city of Boston in a place where we're opening ourselves up to legal liability when we are stewarding the entire city's resources. We are in court against the Trump administration. We've now been, I think, over 30 times involved in one lawsuit or another, whether they were attacking us on our own public safety laws related to protecting immigrant residents or attacking our fair housing program, which they say discriminates against white residents, which is absolutely false, or federal funding that we have actually won the right to continue to use and deploy for our residents. We are very careful that when we make decisions, it is whatever we can do to protect our residents, we do it, and we stand on the law. And in this case, there are also other avenues to help individual employees when they do want to come forward and avail themselves of the Office of Immigrant Advancement's legal consultations. If you are not able to lean on TPS as employment authorization, there are other avenues if you have a pending application for another kind of pathway to legal status or citizenship. There are other ways to secure work authorization. So our legal services community is doing incredible work right now. Our legal community, I should say, is doing incredible work right now in legal services. Many attorneys volunteering their time, getting involved, helping sort out person by person, family by family, what are the options and how do we stabilize each family?
Adam in the North End, you were first with the mayor of the city of Boston. Welcome to the show. Hi.
Yes. Good morning, Jim. Good morning, Marjorie. Good morning, Mayor Wood.
Good morning.
Morning. Good afternoon. Last week, Councilor Flynn blocked a measure in City Council that was proposed to help people from Haiti and other ethnic Syria too, with who have lost their TPS with housing issues. I understand he was concerned about the financial impact of it, but can you speak to that? And would you urge the City Councilor to change his mind and come back? I know the City Council doesn't meet till August 26th, so I think that's too much time to wait. What do you think? Would you urge the council to change its position? Can the council come back early and pass this?
Yeah, I mean, it's very disappointing at a time when our residents are under attack for their housing stability, for their right to education, for their very ability to survive and support their families and have a sense of safety and belonging in this country. When Boston is a city that has seen what happens when we're a community for everyone, we become the safest that we can possibly be. We become the most economically powerful and supported that we could be. We become the best World Cup host city because people recognize the sense of diversity and belonging and fun that can cross cultural and neighborhood and other boundaries here. So it is really important to speak in one voice, protecting our residents and sending that message. On this particular instance, a city council resolution is non-binding, so it did not necessarily mean that there was a dollar amount that would have been spent that all of a sudden is not going to be spent. We are, on the administration side, doing everything we can possibly do to support our residents, including our Haitian community members, including our TPS holders. And the idea that the statement that Councillor Lujan brought forward around, and Councillor Pepin, around ensuring we were coordinating all those services to make it as easy and simple as possible is a really important initiative and one that we are going to continue working with them on. So we are going to keep doing that regardless. So rest assured, it doesn't mean just because Councillor Flynn was again blocking a particular measure that is causing calamity. We're doing it anyway. But it is a disappointing message at a time when our residents need to know that we have their backs, and we are going to do anything possible as urgently as possible to be the city that they have helped build.
Adam, thank you much for your call and your concern. We appreciate it.
You know, we've talked to you a lot about cycling in the city and making the streets safer for cyclists. Terrible tragedy, 36-year-old Louisa Gagg, who was a city transportation planner and an avid cyclist, and someone that you knew was struck and killed by an 18-wheeler on Mission Hill. That was earlier this summer. I know you told BUR that you were very upset, furious, never going to get over it. So is there anything post this awful tragedy that has changed?
There's been work prior and certainly in the days since the loss of Louisa to ensure we're doing everything that we can. Boston has long been a city that is working to lead on keeping people safe in every way. That is how one might traditionally think about public safety and violence prevention, and that is on our streets too. Our streets cut through every aspect of your life, and every single resident in Boston has feedback and is impacted by how our streets are designed. Pedestrian safety, cyclist safety, whether seniors can cross the roads, whether you can count on the bus getting there on time, or whether the T is has slow zones or doesn't have slow zones, whether car traffic is unbearable and causing you to want to move out of the city, or whether you can put all the pieces of your life together and access the great opportunities that we're working on. It all comes back to whether it's connected, reliable, affordable for everyone to access. And so I have put out I wanted to make sure to communicate very clearly what had been in progress and what we're continuing to do, ensuring first and foremost that we are prioritizing the work of well-designed, well-maintained, reliable, safe streets across our city, 800 miles of roadway, plus all the sidewalks and crosswalks and everything to maintain, closing key gaps in our various networks for transit priority and for cycling, as well as making sure those are protected and safe along the way. Effective enforcement, because you could design a street perfectly to accommodate every use, but then if a car is still blocking the crosswalk or the bike lane, it makes it unsafe for everyone. Or if cars are zooming through red lights, it makes it incredibly dangerous. And we're working, to be able to more effectively and efficiently issue those tickets. We need some support on legislation that would allow the City of Boston to have that power. We are now I want to make 2 points on this. One, on moving violations. There is legislation up at the State House that would allow for red light cameras, like other states already have, to capture when people are breaking the laws and then to immediately issue them a ticket. That does have a clear and immediate deterrent effect on behavior. And then the other set of violations is parking violations. So right now, the City of Boston is bound by state law that we can only issue a ticket when one of our traffic enforcement officers, physically goes and puts a ticket on the windshield of a vehicle that's violating something. We are the only city in the Commonwealth that still has that requirement. Other cities now are able to use photo enforcement in different ways or are moving towards that. We should be able to do that too, because we get photos all the time. And if we could set up photo enforcement, that would go a long way. We are going to begin to take the 311 and we're setting up a different app for people to report issues. But we are going to begin to take those photos that we have and communicate, once we have the license plate numbers of vehicles who are parking in dangerous ways, send them a letter. Since we can't issue the ticket yet until the law changes, send them a letter that they are putting others' lives at risk, that this is illegal behavior and a violation, that we were not able to get to their windshield to ticket, but that we expect them to change their behavior. And we're also working towards bike enforcement and sending enforcement officers on bicycles to move more efficiently through bike lanes and other more congested areas. And then, last big topic, 2 more. School zones and pedestrian safety, targeting where our kids are. The most crashes that we have for pedestrians are near schools and parks and playgrounds. And so really focusing there on how we add the crosswalks, add the protections so that our little ones and their families are safe. And then ensuring we're using technology to manage traffic for traffic flow that is efficient for everyone. We now have changed the signal timing at nearly 200 intersections throughout the city using AI and analyzing Google Maps data of when traffic is red, yellow, and green at different times of day. If we can continue to improve and upgrade our signal technology, we should be able to have buses go right through and get a green when they approach a stoplight, and we should be able to have more real-time adjustments of the signals to help traffic move along as
Who
quickly
could change
as
that
possible.
law about being able to ticket without physically?
The state legislature.
This is another thing that the state legislature has to change.
Do
Add
you
that
think,
to your
before we
list.
leave this topic, and it's clear, I listened to the BR interview, I've heard you speak about this. You've been criticized around some street and transportation issues for wanting too much control, which slows down the process. In retrospect, do you have any regrets about how you handled these kinds of issues in the wake of the death of this woman who you knew?
I take every detail of our city very seriously, and I see it as the job of any leader within an organization to be able to understand at a 30,000-foot view and also at the ground level how decisions are being made and where resources are being allocated. And so we are still in the midst of rebuilding and getting our streets and roadway operations to a point where it's not only responsive, but also sustainable and able to be carried out in the long run. There have been, over the history of Boston's 15 years of working on multimodal streets, there have been different reports written and internal audits done over many years. In the last several weeks, I've gone through and read probably 400 pages of all of them. And any one of those snapshots from 2020 to from 2017, you could have applied it to, if you didn't see what the date was, you could have thought easily that it was being written about right now based on what some of the headlines and the concerns have been, that historically there has always been a push and pull in every transportation and streets department about when are you maintaining and managing the operations of repaving, making sure you're keeping crosswalks and sidewalks built up and smooth and safe, and when are you doing new things and using your dollars and capital investments to add a pedestrian bump out or to add a new bike lane that is protected with either posts or concrete or some other barriers. We haven't gotten that balance right all the time in the city, and it's always been a push and pull over the last 15 years. And so when we, over the last 4 years, made a historic investment in closing key remaining gaps in the cycling network, we more than doubled the amount of protected cycling mileage that existed in Boston. But we did it in a way that was fast and cost effective, with plastic posts that quickly become damaged after every single snow season. And then at $300 a post, they get knocked down by trash trucks one week or snow plows one winter, and then it's another cost, and soon the money is going there instead of repaving streets when we began to see falling behind and deterioration of roadways when we weren't getting that balance right. Now, over the last year, we've been retooling, and I have been involved in every single detail to say, how are we deciding where speed humps go? Did we ask the community? Do we have a process that's beyond just an algorithm that feeds things in? Are we going on site and talking to neighbors? Are we thinking about the context of this street versus that one differently? And are we coordinating all of our processes so that instead of thinking, do we put our dollars to repaving so we have smooth streets for drivers, or do we, and bus riders and cyclists, or do we build new things so we can improve safety and urgently close gaps that are there in safety? We have to do both so that our repaving is driven not only by how deteriorated the road is, but also by where the most urgent safety concerns are. And anytime any street is being repaved, that's when you also go in and look to see, should we add a crosswalk? Should we change the configuration?
So very quickly, do you think the criticism has been unfair of your involvement in this?
There's no fair or unfair. I think the reason why Boston is the best in so many categories is because we hold ourselves to really high standards. And that is a role in city government, to take any bit of feedback, criticism, complaint, or raising a concern or a fear that someone experience that someone tells you, and to really think about what are the options to translate this into something better? What can we do to fix the situation? And how do we then ensure that that is also what the larger community needs in terms of balance, and that what's good for cyclists is good for drivers. And I think we've created this false dichotomy between the two camps. But when we do our services right, when we do our community engagement right, and we do our street design right, we're able to serve everyone's needs.
That's Mayor Wu. If you want to talk to her, 877-301-8970.
Craig is at the Boston Public Library microphone. Craig, go ahead.
Hello, Craig.
Hi. I have a question about the elections that are upcoming. There's a rumor. I'm going to be a poll worker in Charlestown. There are rumors that there are going to be federal agents coming into the poll stations. And is your office, or is there any guidance from the state regarding how that's going to be approached?
Yes, it is, as we know, more than a rumor. First of all, I like your shirt. I love your shirt. We got to bring back the vibes. We did get notification through social media that we are among the handful of cities that the Trump administration is planning to send federal election monitors to. We run safe, secure, free elections every year with multiple avenues to vote. The primary election is September 1st this year, so it's coming up very, very soon, and mail ballots have already gone out the door to the first wave of residents who requested them. So residents are voting now by mail. You also have early voting starting very soon in a couple days, and then Election Day, September 1st. So we will be monitoring the monitors in this situation, but we have been working very closely with the Secretary of State's office to ensure that we have the latest technology. Now all of our poll workers using what are called poll pads, so that we can check in every voter, know how many ballots are given out, how many are needed, monitor the supply of all the ballots. The upgrades in technology over the last year and a half have been really, really intensive, and our elections department has worked incredibly hard, done a great job on that, and we are prepared to administer elections as we always do, including in this current federal context.
Craig, thanks for your call. You know, before we take a break, I'm just thinking about what you said in the first 30 minutes here. The mayor of Boston learned about federal monitors being targeted at Boston from social media. Marjorie asked you a question about, is there an ICE facility on the way in downtown Boston? You've done Freedom of Information requests. Can't get a response from our own government. This is not, you're not asking Vladimir Putin to... It's not just that they're not responding
to us. They're attacking us. They're suing us. They're taking away our funding. They're doing everything they can to undermine the places that prove why they are wrong about everything. Their philosophy under this current administration at the federal level is that public is bad. Public is where you meet people who look different than you and speak a different language or worship differently or love differently. And when public gets together, that's when billionaires can't make as much money. And so in order to do what they're doing, to cut science funding and to pare back environmental protections so that the coal, gas, fossil fuel companies make as much money as possible, so that the financial executives make as much money as possible. They need to be able to have the money come from somewhere to go to gigantic corporate tax cuts and gun violence, public education, fair housing. Those are all ways that we build power at the grassroots level that is stronger than any dictator or any autocratic administration. That is the single biggest threat, is to, and the way that they are trying to dismantle cities like Boston, who showed the entire world over the summer what it means when you are beautiful, welcoming to all, family-friendly, investing in the public good. It's tactics of intimidation, of drawing our resources into legal battles, and we know we're on the right side of the law. I hope that these midterm elections will also continue to just dampen the momentum here as we get towards 2028. But we're going to have a lot of rebuilding to do. And I would say, again, going back to the last question about September 1st, we have to hold ourselves accountable to that too. There are legislators, there are people on the ballot right now who have taken votes alongside those who are trying to terrorize our immigrant communities or undermine reproductive rights or take us backwards on climate or give tax cuts, tax breaks to corporate interests over residents. If our proposal that we had put forward for residential tax relief that the City Council passed 3 times, that the House of Representatives passed twice, and then got blocked by the Senate when Senator Collins and Senator Brownsberger stepped up and blocked that, if that had gone through, Boston residents would have saved more than $150 million over the last 2 years in property taxes. Instead, that went to tax cuts for corporate interests here in Massachusetts, here in the city of Boston. And so this is all important and real to talk about at the federal level and to organize, but our everyday government and our local decisions also have to be held to the same standards.
Before we leave, we're going to take a break, but since you brought it up very quickly, there was a piece in the Globe the other day, which I'm sure you read, by a leader or something of the group that was responsible for the repeal of rent control in 1994 on the ballot, citing a study from the Lincoln Land Institute, or whatever it's called, saying that vis-a-vis your plan that you're just referencing, that the effective tax rate for owner-occupied houses in Boston is half the national average. Is that true?
Okay, so I have read that entire Lincoln Land Institute report. I didn't get to read the one that just came out this year, but I went through it extensively last year and the year before as we were going through the tax legislation conversation. And there's the key sleight of hand that they're doing. First of all, this organization's goal is to advance corporate, in this case, trying to reduce property taxes for commercial interests rather than homeowner occupied residential interests. And I do not begrudge them that. That is what a lobbying organization is supposed to do, is to make their best case that they possibly can. But it is important to understand what they are, I think, sometimes confusing or putting out in a confusing way. That a rate is different from an amount. And so if you go through that exact report, it goes through all 50 states and the largest cities in each of them, and what the tax rate is for residents and what it is for commercial interests. It is true that Boston ranks about halfway in the pack or lower down in the rate that is assessed on residents. We are about halfway in the middle of the pack when it comes to corporate rate. But when you turn it into absolute dollars, the report, at least from the last one that I read from last year, notes in there that when you apply that rate to the rapidly increasing property values in Boston, we have among the highest total tax bills anywhere out of those cities. And these, I mean, it's all, you can sort of pick and choose, cherry pick data to make whatever case you want to make, I suppose. But there's nothing more real than hearing from our residents. And I have been in conversations with the state senators, right? I've spoken with senators who represent multiple communities, and Senator Brownsberg has said he believes that Boston paid too little in property taxes relative to Belmont and some of the other communities. At the same time that they prevented Boston from having our compromise temporary provision go through that Boston had already put in place under Mayor Menino, and it was temporary and it worked, it stabilized things, and then it returned to the usual tax code. At the same time, they blocked that for Boston. Watertown had just about the same tax shift proposal go through. And for all the, we can't change precedent, this would affect entire state if Boston gets to do this, other communities have had the same exact problems. And I'm thrilled for Watertown that they were able to have their solution move forward. We just wanted to have the ability to do the same to protect Boston residents. But I think what's clear here through this situation, which is really wonky and hard to understand when it's about municipal finances and taxes, and is it this data point or that data point, however complicated a policy newsletter or op-ed or however wordy the explanations are, the result is the same. We have senators representing Boston right now who don't feel the urgency to act because they don't see government's role, they don't see government's job as needing to take charge of problems that communities members are facing.
This is Collins and Brownsberger you're talking about.
That's correct. And there are great people running for office right now who feel very differently. Daniel Lander running in Fenway, also Brighton, and then Watertown, Cambridge, Latoya Gale running in South Boston, Dorchester, Chinatown, South End. September 1st is Election Day. Please, no matter where you live, no matter who your representation is, get involved, get out to vote. It matters just as much to vote in 2028 for a new president. It matters just as much to vote for your local state legislators this cycle.
Okay, the mayor, as usual, has brought us presents.
Okay.
What do we have today?
Please
Mayor
pass
Wu?
this along to a
I
little
love it.
one in your life. These
Yeah.
are from our Boston Reads program, where we're trying to encourage literacy and really the experience of reading together. So the book Abuela is one that all of our kindergartners will read in school this year. And we have also created story stops now, where you can, out in the neighborhoods, there are stickers on the sidewalk that have a QR code of a particular story you can stop to read. We launched one at outside a fire station that was about Boston firefighters. And anyway, this is summer fun as we're starting to move into back to school and getting our readers engaged.
Okay, before
Dolliver,
we get-
well, look, can I take this one here?
Oh, sure.
Dolliver from Northeastern, you're on with the mayor of the city of Boston. Welcome.
Hi, Mayor Wu. I was wondering if you've been following the ongoing crisis of the Boston Symphony Orchestra. If so, I'm sure you're familiar with the Red Flower campaign, which was actually started by two Boston residents in support of the BSO musicians, as well as Maestro Andres Nelson. Those two gents have managed to mobilize thousands of people to stand in solidarity with the musicians. And I was hoping you could share your thoughts on what it means when a nonprofit such as the BSO pushes aside those artists who create such beautiful music and ignore the thousands of fans that have been seeking out over the past many months. Thank you for your service into our beloved city.
Thank you, Dolliver.
Thank you for calling in. You know, as at least Jim and Marjorie know, the BSO has a very special spot in my heart. It was the first kind of expenditure that I made as a young professional before I could really afford it, to have a young professional subscription to the orchestra, to be able to go. And I've now had the chance to see how involved they are in the community, and to even play alongside some of the incredible artists and musicians who are there. And it is deeply painful to see a rift and rupture in the various parts of this institution that the city leans on so much. You know, I don't know the ins and outs of every part of what's happening. I do know that the musicians have continued to produce just gorgeous, unbelievable sound and concerts, and continue to share their love with the city and at Tanglewood with the larger community. And I also know that organizational change is really hard all the time. In our institution in the city of Boston, there are, you know, conversations every day about what direction we should take the city. And to be able to have processes in place, or to be able to have leadership that is fully aligned, is really important across all the different pillars of that. And so I am going to continue supporting the institution, and I know Chad has been a great partner for the city of Boston when it comes to expanding our Boston Family Days and doing work directly in the community. Andres, of course, is a treasure, but there are times when it doesn't work out, and I don't know the details of exactly why it hasn't worked out, but I hope that we can get to a point soon where everyone feels cared for, and that this institution can be whole onto the next phase of a chapter of their story, and we at the City of Boston will be there to support however and whenever we can.
By the way, I've just urged people who missed yesterday's show, Thomas Dinsmore was with us and did a brilliant job of responding to some of the concerns of the management at the BSO. That's available at youtube.com/GBH News. Charles, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead. Go ahead.
Charles is at the mic. Hello, Charles. What's up?
Hello, hello, Mayor.
Hello.
I'm a proud special education teacher with Boston Public Schools.
Thank you for your service.
So I just wanted to get an understanding of where you stand on the budget cuts that are going to be made for this year.
Boston, well, our budget is done and being implemented at this point. I will say, just in terms of how we get to set our budget every year, revenues and taxes are bound by Prop 2.5, And as long as Boston, unlike most other cities in the country, cannot make our own decisions about how to fund city services, we're sort of buckled in, cinched really tight by that 2.5% limit, when every year other costs for inflation, for healthcare, to support our workforce are going up by far more than 2.5%. So this last year, our budget projections, every time we got updates on how healthcare was going, they got worse and worse. Usually you plan for the worst and then it gets better. But this year, a combination of different factors, but we had healthcare costs go up by 20% in terms of what the city was being charged. And at the same time, enrollment, as you know, enrollment patterns across the country have shown the number of students going down, although Boston had sort of stabilized, and then under the Trump administration and their immigration policies began to decline again. We did make some very painful adjustments that probably should have needed to have been reckoned with many years ago in terms of keeping programs or buildings open that were not matching where the enrollment patterns were actually going. And so when it comes to budget cuts, the total budget for the city went up compared to last year. Our revenues went up compared to last year. BPS and the dollars allocated to the Boston Public Schools went up by more than any other department relative to all the city departments. But the issue is that it wasn't enough, because costs have been going up so much on those fixed things that we can't control, that are just, we're in a really high inflationary period. And so it is incredibly painful. I think if we were not subject to the strict constraints of Prop 2.5, or if we had not had just an outright rejection of our ideas and compromises at the state Senate that we had put forward around revenue, or if we had had any of our proposals that we've sent up to the State House for more revenue, like transfer fee that would have funded affordable housing, which could have then freed up funding for other things, or more funding for MSBA that would help redo even more school buildings. There are ways that we need to be getting at the underlying issue here. We only can spend what we have to spend. And when costs are going up so fast, the system that was put in place isn't working for cities across the Commonwealth. A record number of cities had to go to the ballot to ask for Prop 2.5 overrides, and sometimes by just a couple dozen votes. They did not get the authorization to increase their revenues and had to cut firefighters and police and teachers, and we have not had to make direct cuts for budget purposes alone. We did make adjustments on enrollment so that we preserve the student-teacher ratio and sort of went back to the truing up of the baseline that, again, should have been reckoned with a while ago. But I'm very concerned that it may get worse before it gets better. And we need every city's plight right now to be recognized, that the funding systems aren't working out how they need to be in this current economic environment. My kids are in the Boston Public Schools. We're getting ready for back to school. I was just at ALI, August Leadership Institute, with all of our school leaders and the superintendent earlier in the week. And this is the most important investment that we can make, the best return that we get on our dollars. And it's incredibly painful to know that we can't provide that soft landing, can't go above and beyond to what we want to do because we're cinched so tight. We've done the best that we can to be responsible about that. But it is a larger fight that I am ready and continuing to take on around how we get the revenues overall that will allow us to do what we need to do.
You've mentioned several times in your answer to Charles, Prop 2.5, and several months ago you said on our show that you thought the legislature should consider repealing Prop 2.5, and I think I don't want to I think you may have had second thoughts afterwards. Where are you today on what the legislature should do around Prop 2.5?
I haven't. I'm not back and forth or second thoughts. I think what happened was initially I answered a yes or no question, and probably should have just given more details then. But the question when asked was, should Prop 2.5 be repealed or changed? Yes, it needs to be. Do I believe that we should just scrap our tax code entirely? No. But here's what we need. The benefits of Prop 2.5 are that by setting a certain number, it does provide stability, right? So we then give homeowners the sense that, in stable times when commercial values aren't fluctuating wildly, generally there's a little bit more predictability. For cities, it does mean that our 2.5% is something that we can rely on, even though it can be very unfair how that gets allocated between residents and commercial interest in certain years. Stability is important. However, Prop 2.5 was designed at a time when they were not, I don't think, ever anticipating inflationary costs, the rate of inflation being way higher than 2.5%, like 10 times higher in certain cases. And so cities need to be able to have the flexibility to make the investments that count. And
So what should they do? Just give you the power to tax locally rather than, what should they do?
other cities around the country have that set up. The city of Boston would gladly do that, and we would do that responsibly, and we're accountable to the voters in how we do that. If that is not the system that we're starting with, which is not, we need to, at the very least, have tweaks to the current system where in very high inflationary years, the cities have the flexibility to apportion between residential and commercial differently, or to be able to make investments that then don't count against the cap that is holding us back.
So
in every other way.
2.5 might be inflation connected, is what one of the things you're suggesting. Yes.
Yes,
You know-
Okay.
and it also comes down to local aid. That New York City, for example, every city receives some amount of dollars from the state, and we also have to pay dollars to the state. In the city of Boston, we have to pay more than $100 million to the MBTA for a local assessment. We have to pay for charter school, chargeback system, this and that and the other. On net, when you even all of that out, state funding is about 2% of the city of Boston's budget, net, the in and out. In New York, it's about 4 times that. And their state has also stepped up and provided $1 billion for childcare to be expanded to 2-year-olds. And so that kind of partnership, being able to work with a shared agenda for the hub city that is connected with every city across the Commonwealth and in conversation with those cities, and then working to access the tax dollars that we all generate and ensure that the state and city are aligned in how we're doing that. That's really important. And again, that is why this election matters and why we need to have representation that understands that urgency.
You know, speaking of taxes, and we'll get to the BU deal you cut in just a few minutes, but people realize that Boston is full of tax-exempt property, city, colleges, universities, hospitals, et cetera. There's something called a pilot program, payment in lieu of taxes. And some places, GBH, are paying their full share, for example. Some of the hospitals, like Beth Israel, but a lot of places are not paying their full share at all. They're just 20%, 50%, and they just seem to get away with it. That would make a difference if all these places, Roxbury Latin School is paying nothing. That's a private school with high tuition, so I don't get that. But anyway, can anything be done about that, to have people pay what they're supposed to be paying?
So more than half of the city's land parcels, if I have my numbers right, are actually tax exempt. It's nonprofits, large institutions like the sectors that you mentioned, and public property, so state property, for instance, or city property. And when our payment in lieu of taxes program was started now probably about 16 years ago, it was really revolutionary because there's no legal way for cities, there's no legal way to require institutions that are tax exempt to pay taxes, right? That is a federal designation they get. But in recognition that they use our city roadways and first responders and other services, and they rely on the stability of their local community for the university to thrive or for the hospital to have patients, we have been revamping that program. It's not only being able to come to agreements with individual institutions like BU and Northeastern, Wentworth to be able to increase the pilot payment that they're making, but also to be clear about where those dollars are going. We now have specific housing commitments, recognizing that student housing and where students live are a big part of the supply that's available for families and for residents in Boston, and being able to engage universities in that partnership goes a long way. Our hospitals also, I think the other key thing to keep in mind about these institutions is that just as the city of Boston is under attack, they really are the industries that underpin Boston, and they have been very directly under attack. Science, research, healthcare, education, higher education, our Boston and Cambridge institutions in particular, just in the eye of the storm. And so we want to both strengthen what they're doing, be able to protect the important work that they're contributing to the community, and also ensure that they are working with us so that we make the most of the dollars they put into our neighborhoods.
Wait, we only have 30 seconds. Couldn't the legislature, I mean, not that they do it, couldn't they mandate that a certain level of what would be the property taxes of a nonprofit have to be paid? They could address the situation rather than you having to go hat in hand, one by one to every, I don't mean you personally, but one-on-one to every single institution, right?
I'm not sure if it's state law could override federal law. Maybe there's a separate state tax that could be
Well, and not
assessed,
churches and stuff like that, but regular nonprofits,
yep.
universities, that kind of thing. They could, well, whatever.
It's possible, yes.
We're out of time. We'll get to it.
I will say a quick example. We created a housing fund. All of our hospitals turned their community mitigation dollars into that revolving loan fund. It has now helped stabilize more than 1,000 families. So there's possibilities of good work. We just have to keep going at it.